Hello, everyone. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Susan Henderson to the show. Susan is the Associate Executive Director of Hope House, which is a Virginia-based agency that provides in-home supports to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Welcome to the show, Susan.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us about Hope House.
I'd love to. Hope House Foundation provides in-home supports to individuals with developmental disabilities, as you said. But what makes us unique is that all of the supports that we provide are in the individual's own home. No one that we support lives with family members or anyone unless they have selected to live maybe with a significant other, but they live in the community, mostly in apartment complexes, and in all of those apartment complexes, they live with other individuals without disabilities. It's completely inclusive for everyone to just make things just like it would be for anyone else that's renting an apartment in the community. So we're excited to do that.
Do you help your clients to source the apartments?
We absolutely do. It's a really cumbersome process, especially when you're adding any type of housing vouchers or additional funding in the mix to help pay for the rent. So that can be overwhelming to anyone. So we absolutely help those that we support make those connections with landlords and help them throughout that entire process of the initial rent.
So the folks that you support, would you describe them as high functioning, or are they folks that require significant in-home support?
We support individuals with all levels of need and all levels of independence. So someone might need us there constantly, and others may just need a drop-in service once or twice a week, and anything and everything in between. It's all individualized.
Wow. So how many people is Hope House supporting?
Over 120 people currently.
That's fantastic. And does the support include related, do you work with other agencies to provide, so for example, supported employment services, or do you work with your clients around recreational services directly, or is that typically with other partners?
Sure. We do assist with any activities of daily living that the individual is interested in or needs support with, including planning activities, being a part of their community, joining clubs, being a part of organizations, interacting with family members and friends in the community. We do not provide any employment assistance. That's separate in Virginia, but we do have agencies that we can direct someone to.
That's understandable. So I get it. So talk to me about do you have like a typical client profile of people you help, and how do they find out about you?
They find out about us typically through their support coordinators or case managers, depending on where you're living in the typical language. But that is the gatekeeper. Those are the folks that have the funding, the Medicaid waiver funding that is necessary to receive our supports. So that's the typical route. Often we have medical professionals in the community that have heard about us because they've seen us assisting others at medical appointments and so forth. So that's where we'll get some referrals, and some are just being in the community and other people seeing us helping individuals and supporting individuals where they want to be. And those are all great places to get referrals. We don't have a typical client profile because we support such a variety of needs and levels of needs.
Do you find that so how long has Hope House been providing this type of housing support for its clients?
I'm glad you asked that question because this wasn't how we always did things. We started back in the 60s with a group of family members who had loved ones with a developmental disability. Back at that time, really the only option other than your own home was to send your loved one to an institution. And they decided there had to be a better option than an institution. So they got together and they were hoping someone would give them a house. And then they thought, Foundation sounded charitable. So that is the very grassroots beginning of Hope House Foundation. Their dream came true, and someone did give them a house. And I think the most amazing thing about that story is that during that process, they realized the need was so great that not a single one of their loved ones in that original group of parents ended up moving into that first home. They realized the need was so much greater in the community, and they had resources that others didn't. So they created this organization that they then had others join and be a part of. So we became the provider of the very first group home services in Virginia back in the 60s. That was revolutionary. And here we are today in 2022, and that is still the most prevalent type of support provided in Virginia is group homes. So back in the 80s and early 90s, we started asking people if they were happy. Of course, people were happy, but then we realized we needed to ask a different question. What else would you like? Is there anything else that you would like? And overwhelmingly, the individuals we were supporting at that time kept saying, my own space, my own kitchen, my own living room, my own bathroom. I want my own place. So we started the next revolution, if you will, and started closing all of the group homes and providing the services that we do now. So by the mid 90s, all of our group homes had closed, and we were just providing in-home supports in people's apartments.
So let's paint a picture of this. I'm a client of yours. I've lived in a group home where some agency might come in and provide services to me and the group home, but I share a kitchen and maybe bathroom with other people living in the home. Is that a fair way to say what that model looks like? Was looking like?
That's what the old model looked like. Yes.
So tell me more about for the client what the new model looks like.
Each individual has their own apartment, their own lease, and
with their own bathroom and their own kitchen.
Absolutely, their own bathroom. Some individuals that have more medical equipment have a 2-bedroom apartment. If they don't need a 2-bedroom, they have a 1-bedroom. They can choose the city and the community where they want to live. If they're really active and like to walk a lot, then we'll look for a community where they can have walkable space, where they can meet neighbors. If they like to walk to their workplace, then we look for somewhere that will accommodate that.
How difficult is it to find adequately accessible apartments for these clients of yours? Do you actually go out into the community and source the apartments, and how hard is it to do that? It sounds to me that might be difficult.
It's very difficult to find accessibility anywhere, and then add on top of that again the funding for the apartments. Anytime you add the housing choice vouchers or some of the other housing funding that's available, it makes owners and landlords a little bit nervous and sometimes unwilling to lease to someone.
Right.
And so we decided that we needed to help solve that problem a little bit more. And we created an affiliate organization called the Residential Corporation. And they raised funds, and their mission was to provide safe and affordable housing to individuals with disabilities and the community at large. So that affiliate group started purchasing properties where we knew that we could have space for individuals with disabilities. We knew we had the ability to modify the apartments and to give a safe space to folks that didn't have to worry about being kicked out of their apartments.
Right.
Simply because they were a little bit different than someone else, or because the landlord didn't want to accept the funding anymore, or you name it. We've seen the excuses for not wanting people to be a part of the greater community.
So are all of your clients now in housing that is owned by this related entity?
No, they're not. And I'm very happy to say that. We utilize that group when we need to and as much as we can, but it's also important to have a broader footprint in the community and more options. So we do spend a lot of time trying to find partnerships with landlords and property owners. We also realize that some of our properties are a little bit older, and we've modified them as much as possible, and we need more accessibility. So we knew that there had to be a next, to continue asking, what's next? What can we do to provide even more options? So that is when we started partnering with developers and using LIHTC funding, federal funding. It's available across the United States. Each state can implement theirs differently, but we started partnering with those developers using LIHTC funding with these set-aside units, these accessible set-aside units specifically for people with disabilities. And now we are partnering with them so that we can bring more accessibility and more choice to those we support.
Are you able to provide housing to all of the folks that want it in your community?
No, I wish that we could, because also with services, our services as well, with the housing crisis that we're seeing right now, especially in Virginia, some of the tenant landlord rules have changed, and that's been a good thing. That
Yeah.
landlords can no longer discriminate based on your source of funding. So you can no longer say, I'm not accepting a voucher. So the other way to get around that is to increase your rent so it's more than the fair
Voucher
market.
will cover, yeah.
Mhm. Yes. So we've seen a decrease in the amount of partners that we have in the
Oh.
community as options for people with disabilities.
So do you have, how is that managed? I mean, you'll get a referral from for someone who needs housing. How long does it take to find them housing that that you can support them in?
Right now, it's taking quite a bit of time because we have the housing crisis where we just had multiple people who've received notices that their rent is increasing to a limit that is way exceeding the allowable affordable limits. So we've just had to work with 2 full teams of people to try to help them find additional housing. And that's taken an enormous amount of time. And we're still not done with the process. We still have other individuals to find spaces for. The other issue is the staffing crisis that's also happening across the country.
Yeah.
And you marry a staffing crisis and a housing crisis together, and it's a recipe for disaster for those with developmental disabilities. And that's what we're facing right now.
What percentage, do you have any sense of how many people with IDD in Virginia are not getting adequate housing? Do you have any idea of what that looks like?
I know that there are over 13,000 people on a wait list just for Medicaid waiver services in Virginia.
13,000 people
On a wait list.
I did an interview earlier on my podcast with a researcher, an expert on this, who said we have an invisible housing crisis in this country because there are a lot of people with developmental disabilities or any kind of disability really, who are still living at home being cared for by parents who are aging out of their ability to take care of them. And that's not really well tracked in the counting of people who have inadequate, inaccessible housing.
That's true. Though all of the individuals who are on the wait list need some sort of housing, I would expect that at least half, if not the majority of them, would want independent housing if it was available to them. And then there are all of those individuals who you just mentioned who are not even on the wait list yet for the Medicaid waiver funding. I receive at least 1 to 2 calls per week at my small organization from family members that have no idea what the Medicaid waiver is and even how to apply for it.
You mentioned the crisis in staffing, where and we're talking about we're talking about in-home support staff who's going to go in and help people with activities of daily living and other and support for cooking, cleaning, all those types of things. Yes. And that is a countrywide problem. I've done interviews on this podcast with people who are really looking seriously at remote support services where we use technology as an aid or as an adjunct to live individuals so that we can help alleviate some of that stress in the system. Is this something that your organization has looked at, and what do you think of that?
Yes, we are definitely looking at it right now. It's a lot of it goes back to funding and regulation and what we're able to receive for that. But there's also that human connection that online technology just can't make up for. When you're
Right.
talking about someone feeling connected,
Yeah.
someone making those connections, especially if they're new to living on their own, that having someone that you can count on, that you know is available at all times, and getting used to the technologies. A lot of the individuals that are coming to us are older and they've not grown up with this technology like my own children have done and can do anything using a computer and a phone without any instruction. That's not typically the generation that we're working with right now, that are in the most need, that are on that priority wait list for services. That's just not who's there.
Right. So it isn't the panacea. It isn't a panacea, the use of technology to help do in-home support.
That's correct.
Yeah. Do you have any clients who are using your services but are not using are using a private pay kind of model, or paying market rally rents?
We have in the past, but we do not currently have anyone going down that route. It's an expensive thing to try to keep up with, for
Yeah.
sure. And there just aren't that many individuals with access to that type of private funding.
Right, right. What do you think? I want to rephrase that question.
Mhm.
So you mentioned before about inclusivity. Can you talk with me more about how your model is more inclusive than perhaps other models of housing are for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities?
Sure. I think one of the most important things about the way we provide supports is the safety of a lot of eyes watching. And I think that can be a large misconception for a lot of people, that if you're in the community, if your loved one is in the community and they have a disability, then it's not as safe as being in some type of group setting. And I beg to differ, because if you're in a group setting, you're in a set of walls, there's no one else inside of those walls who's taking a look. No one gets a glimpse of what's happening inside those walls. When you're living in the community in your own apartment, you're going to have neighbors above you, beside of you, maybe below you, but there are neighbors around you that can see staff coming and going, or not coming and going when they're supposed to. They can hear conversations. They can hear if the conversation's a little loud. They know if someone has come or gone from that apartment more often. Your neighbors get to know you just like we do with our neighbors wherever we live. We can be a little nosy as well and notice something a little out of the norm. And that it works the same way for people with disabilities when they live in a community with others that are not being supported, that do not have disabilities. So that is a big part of what we do. It's about safety. And I can guarantee that if someone is not getting the support they need, then we're going to hear about it from a community member who's looking out for their neighbor. It also helps with the thought of reciprocity, doing something nice for your neighbor, and then your neighbor does something for you. Maybe you take in a package that's sitting out in the rain, and then you call your neighbor or leave a note on their door, and you get to know people the same way that individuals without disabilities do in their own communities and neighborhoods every single day. And that's so important. It's not just paid people in your life, it's your neighbors, and then maybe you would start going to church with one of them, or you see other things going on in your community that you want to be a part of, instead of how many people want to go here today and people raise their hand. It's where do you want to go today? Let's go do that.
In your model, you're placing your clients in various apartments all over your community that aren't specifically necessarily designed as inclusive communities. Is that fair? Because I know I was talking with someone on my podcast a few weeks ago where they have a resident manager, and they can know, they have a certain number of they have a certain number of they have certain quality of relationships that they can establish between the people living in the building and the non-disabled people who don't identify as disabled, people living in the community. If you can't, like, how do you educate the neighbors about their neighbors who are receiving support from Hope House? Is there a process for that?
It's more, it's done more naturally,
Mhm.
to be perfectly honest. When someone new moves in beside you or me, we might choose to welcome ourselves or walk across the street and say hello to our neighbor, or see someone in a hallway and say hello. And we do that the same way. We help the individual that we're supporting to build skills, to be able to have a conversation with their neighbor walking down the hall or outside in the parking lot, those types of circumstances. That's the support that we provide.
Right,
The
right.
greatest piece of it is that we don't walk up and say, hey, I'm staff, and this is so-and-so with the disability, because I sure
Right.
hope no one introduces me that way. Here's
Yes.
this blonde woman that can cook really well, and she gets a little nutty when her front yard has a lot of weeds in it. I don't want you to describe that. So we try to use those same values that anyone else uses when you live in the community. We also like to try to encourage the people we support to build community through maybe having if you want to have a cookout, if your apartment complex has the facilities to do that, a grilling experience, or just, again, how to talk to your neighbors. Maybe organize a neighborhood cleanup and talk to your neighbors and meet your neighbors that way.
That's great. So, do you have in Virginia, are there a lot of agencies that do something similar to Hope House, or are you like out there all by yourselves in this space?
You, given that we started doing this years ago, you would think there would be more
Yeah.
organizations doing what we do. We are the only organization doing this exclusively in Virginia. There are other in-home support providers, and there are
Right.
definitely providers who are starting to get on board with similar types of services, but they also provide additional services in other ways too, whether it be group day opportunities or more group home, traditional group home living, that sort of
Yeah.
thing.
So it's clear that we have a problem of inadequate supply of affordable rental units. We
Yes,
also, it's clear that we have a problem with staffing. What
yes.
other challenges are you dealing with in now with, with providing this type of housing support for your clients?
Well, I think those two are big enough.
Yeah, I agree. They're huge.
There is still the NIMBY, not in my
Yeah,
backyard.
I was going to ask. That's right. How do you manage that?
It really is about having conversations with property managers about what value you and the people you're going to support can bring to their community. What property manager wouldn't want an extra set of eyes on the property? We're going to have staff there oftentimes almost 24 hours a day. That's an extra set of eyes that's watching everything that happens.
Yeah.
We also make sure they understand that we will leave the property just as good, if not better, than we found it. We're going to clean up our trash. We're going to be responsible for anything that happens in that unit. They know we're going to make sure payment happens on time. So there's a lot of these benefits that can't be guaranteed with other renters that we can sit down with property management and say, look at all of these great benefits. Can you help us? Can you get on board and support what we're trying to do? And then we'll be as supportive long-term neighbors as well. Most of the people we support, it's not a stop on the way to somewhere else. For
Right.
many of the people we support, this is going to be their forever home. So
Right.
that's important for property managers to know that too.
Security. Yeah.
Yeah. When you have an apartment, you're not going to have to turn over every year or every 2 years. So
Right.
those are important conversations to have with property managers to see the value that you can bring. And by doing so, we've changed a lot of minds.
Yeah, that's great. So, how long have you been involved with Hope House and in support for people with IDD?
I've been here for over 18 years.
18 years. Wow. Is there a specific impetus that got you into this line of work, got you interested in supporting people in this community?
Definitely. I was always involved with volunteer work and service learning at the collegiate level, organizing service learning opportunities. And they asked me to be an advisor for the group Best Buddies,
Huh?
the international group. And I wanted to be a good advisor, so I'd go along on the trips. And there was always, it paired college students with individuals with disabilities in the community. So, of course, being college students, there were always some who didn't show up. So I would fill in. And I went to the Philadelphia Zoo with an individual. His name was David, and I was his buddy for the day as this collegiate advisor. And within 10 minutes, he was lost. And what I realized, I panicked the entire afternoon trying to find this individual, trying my best. And I,
Oh my goodness.
how in the world? I was so scared. How in the world am I ever going to explain this? I'm supposed to
Oh
be
my
the adult in
goodness.
charge. What's going to happen? When it was time to meet at the end of the day, and I'm still panicked because I have not found him, he was where we were supposed to meet at the end of the day. He was there.
Wow.
And I walked up to him and explained, oh my goodness. He said, I wasn't lost. You were lost. I knew where I was supposed to be. I knew where I wanted to go. And I'm here. And I realized he's right.
Wow.
I just automatically assumed, because he had a disability and I didn't, that I needed to be the responsible party. And he taught me so much in that one trip. He knew
Wow.
exactly what he was doing.
Wow.
I needed his guidance throughout that trip. I was the one that needed assistance. And I realized in that moment, there's so much to learn from individuals, regardless, disability or not. And we just need to take the time to listen, to ask questions, to see what he wanted to do, not what I wanted to do. And I said, that's it. This is what I'm going to do next. I'm going to make sure everybody learns this, everybody knows this, and that people have a voice. And here I am.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that story. That's awesome.
You're welcome.
So we're nearly out of time. I have listeners all over the country who are trying to figure out the accessible housing piece, whether they be service providers or land developers or other advocates. Do you have any kind of thought or advice about how, just in general terms, that there's lessons from what Hope House has learned that other people could take advantage of and learn for their own communities?
Yes. 3 things today. 1, you have to pick the service for the individuals with disabilities. You have to pick the service that works for you. Some people want to be on their own, want to have their own space. Go for it. Don't let anyone tell you not to do that. There is a way to make it happen, and to make it happen safely and successfully. Others prefer to live with a group of people, and that's okay too. Just what you want can happen, and don't settle for anything less. The second thing I would say for providers who are trying to do this work would be, don't be afraid to knock on doors. The housing isn't going to come to you. Rarely is it ever going to come to you. So go out, knock on doors, see who you know that knows someone else that owns property or is a property manager, and have those very same conversations. You have to do that. There's not going to be an ad in the paper that says, hey, bring some folks and live here. Go knock on doors and tell them what you can bring to the table, just like we did. It's not going to happen without that. And third, for developers or maybe even providers who are thinking about creating their own housing, what I've learned is to stay in your lane. So we provide supports really, really well, and we know what people need. We also should not be the developer that's going out and building a property, because I don't know about that, but I can partner with somebody who does know how to do that. So know what you bring to the table, promote what you bring to the table, and find other people that have the skills that you'd like to partner with, rather than trying to run yourself ragged learning it all.
Wise words. Thank you.
You're
So
welcome.
if people want to learn more about Hope House or about your work, how should they get in touch?
We have a website, www.hope-house.org.
Terrific. I will put that in my show notes as well.
Great.
All right. Well, I really appreciate your time today, Susan. It's been such a delight to chat with you and to learn about Hope House.
This has been great. Thank you.